Kambui, thank you very much for agreeing to do the talk this evening. I'm excited to hear what it is that you're going to say. For the audience, there were many reasons why I wanted Kambui to be part of this semester. He's an artist that I've been following for a great number of years now. But in particular, one of the things that I think is very interesting about the way that Kambui works is in relation to duration. He tends to work on projects year on year on year, some of them for up to a decade. One of the shows that is currently on, that opened on November the 1st, North Star, in the San Jose Museum of Art, is a project that he's been working on since it's like 2000.
Yeah, about 5 years. Can you hear me okay?
I can. I'm hoping that.
I'm hoping everyone else can too.
So one of the things that Kambui and I have discussed that he'll be presenting on tonight is kind of thinking through what it means as an artist to be developing a project over that kind of extended period of time. So he's going to show you, after giving you a kind of short overview, he's gonna talk about two different projects in relation to duration. So for those in the audience, again, sorry we can't see you. Any questions you put into the Q&A, I will ask Kambui as we go along when they seem relevant. And
yeah, and you can ask me questions too, Kate, during it. I feel like it'll be a great way to kick up the dust.
Sounds good.
And you know what? I think I'm gonna start with maybe an older project. I said older like it's old, but it's not. It's it's called In the Dark We Lose Our Edges, which I put together for the Sharjah Biennial in 2023. It's an immersive installation, much like a lot of the installations that I do and a lot of the work that I'm interested in when we talk about duration. Part of it is being all encompassed. So it's something that you can return to, and there's a new space for you in it. Okay. I'll start with just like some ideas about duration and why I'm sort of into duration. Um, like growing up in Brooklyn, I would go to these museums all around here, like they was mine, and I would go with my brother, who was a teenager, maybe like 15, 16, and we would go so often. My like earliest assumption of how you engage with a work of art was that you would go, you know, 25 times to see it. And, even now there are pieces that I visit kind of annually. So my relationship to totem poles at the Brooklyn Museum are different now than they were when I was 6, or when I go see Bill Trailer at the Met or Liechtenstein. Part of what I'm tracking, what I'm looking at, is also the way I look. So the the colors were super important to me when I was younger, and the fact that there was like a comic book. So in the case of like Liechtenstein, there was a comic book that was big enough for me to walk into. That the scale shift, those were the things that really stuck with me. But then I would come back later, maybe in my 20s, and it would be about comic books in relationship to silk screening. And so what I've hoped for in my work is that whenever you experience a work, that is something that while it's up, you can come back and have varying experiences, as well as if it's permanently somewhere, you can grow. It's kind of like fandom. Sometimes you're like, this is the best painting ever, and then you're like, boo. I like this. And then you come back again, you're like, the corner of this painting is really useful for something I'm working on. And so as an early, viewer of art or a young artist, duration was sort of baked into my understanding of a work of art, as well as things like proximity, and scale, and how it shifts both as I got bigger and as I started to look at work that was not indoor work, which is a whole nother conversation. A little preface on San Jose. If we go full screen, San Jose is the first culmination of all of the work together. But what was nice about doing it at San Jose, one of the things that you never really get to see when you are working on a project for so long, is that it's a relationship to one another. So you get a chance to see, 16, 17 paintings at once and the conversations they have amongst themselves. Whereas when you are in the studio, those conversations are happening, those conversations are happening in your head. And you are remembering the piece that you made 2 years ago as it relates to the work that you made, last week, or you have those two up, but you it's a constant carrying of dialogues with you for that period, that duration. Um, and so when you put on an exhibition and you see it all at once, it's pretty amazing because it all spills back out. It's like a flood of both memories and intersections and lineages. You can see the painting that three paintings later made sense, So the main hall at San Jose, it's about 70 feet long. And I often like to sort of set the context. Most of my work, what I'm interested in is creating a context. Um, so often I'm expected to operate within a context that's not provided for me or is directly provided against me. And so um, in this case, like a lot of the way I think is not necessarily in a white cube. So before I started doing anything, what I wanted to do is sort of set a context for these paintings for the paintings and the video and the sculpture to live in, for you as a viewer to live in. So painted the entire gallery with this kind of abstract mural, which is in conversation with the backgrounds within the paintings, as you'll see later. And we can go next. So this is one side of the gallery, and just for a sense of scale, the large painting that's in the center is 8 feet. And the other thing that I think about in this installation of the work is the viewer walking through. So at that scale, you begin to both picture yourself, and it's almost a one-to-one scale. And your looking happens as you traverse, which is I thought was really beautiful about the space, that there were no walls. So when you walk in, you just keep going, and you have to look back at something. You have to physically move back to it. Um, Also, the shape of the gallery is very close to the shape of the plane. The work, we didn't really talk at all about the work. The work is about, um, it looks at white supremacy and oppression as this thing that's thought of as innate and is, oh man, wish we could, but it's just the way things are. And I think we talk about gravity and think about gravity as this perpetual constant. Um, and so I was interested in this as a metaphor, and this idea of, well, what's the black body when it's unhinged from these ideas of trauma and violence and oppression? What is it in zero gravity? it's a propositional space, but it's all in a space of imagination. But it's also, I wanted us to literally engage in being weightless and, by extension, boundless in some ways. So some of the paintings are based off of that imagined space, and some of the paintings are from taking a group of people up into a parabola flight that I charted, and we were weightless. So parabola flights are where it's like a giant roller coaster. One plane goes like this, and then come more like this, and then comes down, and then so when you're in a when you're in a roller coaster and you hit the top, that feeling like ooh, and you feel like you're almost floating. When you do it in a plane, everything in the plane begins to float. And so it's been NASA training since since the Apollo missions. Um, so I was able to chart um, a flight, and so took 7 people up, and my amazing crew and the flight crew, um, and the film that results from it is about that experience. The paintings that you see here are both a result from that and the sort of impetus for that. It said, like, I can imagine it, and therefore I can make it come to be. And so we did. We can keep going through. We hopped to like maybe 5. Yeah. Um, and so it's great to look at something like this where it was one of the first ones that I made at BlackRock in Dakar. Um, the residency was the first place to really support the project. Excuse me, and it was an opportunity to see what a scale shift would mean for this type of painting for me. The paintings are ink, watercolor, and then they're also graphite. So this most of the gray are different kinds of graphite. So when you look at it, there's a surface play that I'm really interested in. Again, this how do you engage with the viewer's body to give different possibilities as you move? Next. This one is called, that last one was Last Horizon. This one is called Ghost Leisure. And all of the orange is also a two-way pigment that goes from orange to like a magenta as you move around it. Actually, like orange to like a gold as you move around it. So there's a dimensionality that happens when you engage with the work. Um, what I found was that for me, being in a weightless space, there was a kind of dematerialization of my body. Like I didn't just think of like my body stopping at my fingers and toes. It was almost like I couldn't tell where my fingers and toes were. It was really hard to describe, but it's almost like your body is a thought. And so how you move is kind of different because you have this third axis, but also you only access that third axis by thinking, not on a 2D plane. Um, and so, what I see in a lot of the works that happen after, and the seed was planted before, this dematerialized body just keeps showing up over and over in my mind. And there are different ways to sort of access it over the course of the 5-year project. Next.
Do you go up into the plane,
Uh huh.
weightless, and then you go on a residency and start making the work? Or are you making some of these works before you've become weightless yourself?
The latter. So when I have the idea and I'm like, this would be a great idea. Now I only have to find a plane, the crew, a bag of money, a bunch of people. And that took about 2 years. And during those 2 years, I'm making these paintings in this sort of imagined space. And also, there's other questions that I have. What does the space look like that's not outer space? That is an abstract space. So, for what I landed on was the way space time is described is as a fabric. And so, why not use a fabric? I was caught up trying to make long marks. So, if I want to make a 6 foot mark or a 4 foot mark, I don't want to have to do it with a brush.
Mhm.
I was building these tools to make modular marks. So, like, kind of like rollers, but that was too mechanical. And what really was helpful for me is finding fabric and nets and different lattices that allowed me to literally make gesture, um, as a stencil and as a stamp. Use this fabric as a tool to make long, articulate marks. And so those are the sort of things that happen before the flight. It's like trying to understand what this visual language would be, and not being afraid to have it shift or change even before the flight and definitely after the flight. Um,
These
and
images we're looking at are here.
What'd you say?
These images that we're looking at the
Uh,
moment,
yep.
they're this sequence, right? So that one is there.
Yes.
Gotcha. So that the scale is pretty big.
It's funny. It always depends on who you talk to. Like, um, a long time ago, a good friend of mine, Hank, said to me, if you should paint, you like to make things big. How come you make these paintings that are not your size? You should make them your size. And I was like, yeah, I think so. There's a lot to work out between going from something that's like, like this to something that's 8 feet, which is not my size, but is a good size for me. Like it
Mhm.
feels at the larger scale. And then these are probably like 4.5 foot squares, somewhere in there. Um, when you are using, large pieces of fabric, you want a little bit more runway, you know, you want a little bit more space, um, to be gestural, because only part of the gesture actually lands on the paper. So you need more space, but you also need the canvas or the substrate to have, in this case, paper, to have more space. So it works out really well for me in terms of making sure that I have enough space to make the marks that I want to make. Like make you know, a long movement is different than like a smaller arc. Um, and I guess, another friend of mine, Christopher Myers makes a lot of jokes where he says, like I like watercolor because it's like performance painting. Like, I
Mhm.
like that you make a mark, it's 5 minutes in, and then you wait, and then you pull it at 2 minutes, or you only have a open window that's really narrow. Or even just the way I'm talking about, needing enough space for my body to make a move that you get a little snippet of on the page.
So this is a painting?
No, this is a video. So there's a video installation. This is a piece called Death Drop Loop. And so one of the participants that went up was a dancer named Johnny, and Johnny danced at a lot of balls. And one of the things he was voguing in zero gravity, and I'd always been in awe of the death drop. And I was just like, I always was like, it's like the evil Knievel of dancing. Um, but you can't. So I wanted to see what it would look like in zero gravity, and so there's a play that happens in the futility of not being able to actually drop. It's like this kind of playful loop that happens. So we filmed that, stacked it, and then it's projected on a doorway. So when you walk into the gallery, this is the exact shape and design of the doorway that you just walked through. So it's a kind of twinning and portal. And it's like I said, a video, but it's the same luminosity as the paintings. So at first it seems like you said, is this a painting? And
Mhm.
it's of similar scale. So I wanted you, as you experience the show, to be able to walk inside the paintings and also to think about walking inside this video space as well. And it's right behind um, a sculpture entitled Ascension that we'll see, I think, in the next slide. Maybe we go one more, might be a better look at it. We'll go back one. But it's one more. One more. Yeah, I think that's a it's a ceramic sculpture that concerns itself with this point of departure. So it's through the a doorway through the center. There are steps along the side that lead up to a plank. And it's a set of challenges, or I just think of a set of moments where what are you going to do, like when you get to the edge of a plank, when you pass through a threshold. And so those decisions are kind of invisible, and we don't always take stock of the many decisions we make. So when I was thinking about alterity and the whole exhibition being a, a challenge, a guess, like maybe like would it be possible to exist in this space of boundlessness? Getting there is about passing through some threshold that we may or may not see coming.
Mhm.
Um, and so it's the only sculpture in the show, and it is non-figurative. Um, I wanted it to be in science again. I look at the cosmos a little bit, and there's this thing called black bodies, and it's a celestial body that does not emit light, um, and you just can't see it. It doesn't reflect light either. Black holes do it, but it's not the only type of black holes. Aren't the only type of black bodies. Um, and when I do a lot of research, and we went to the NASA Ames Research Center during one of the site visits to the museum, and this came up, and it's we talked a lot about, well, then how do you see, and seeing becomes this triangulation. Seeing becomes like, well, I know what the light's doing, how much the light's bending, so I know how big this thing that I can't see is. Or um, it moves, and so we piece together images from behind it, and so we can then compare that to what we can't see, 10 frames later. So it's always this sort of refraction of seeing, and I was interested in that because I feel like that is the Black American experience. I think a lot in a lot of ways. Um, so when you walk in, it was important to me that you had this piece of architecture that is right at the scale of being a model for a piece of architecture, as well as being a kind of body of its own. And as you move towards it, it's you become more aware of what it is, but you also can't see it. You see it because of the video that's behind it.
Yeah.
Um, and as the video behind it is a series of moving images, your experience and knowledge of what it is dynamic. And so you have like a 70-foot runway to sort of piece it together before you stop at the end and make some decisions about what it is. Um, and this is the video room for the film North of Never, which is a film about you saw at Lincoln Center um, a year ago about the flight and the experiences that people had being weightless and the things that it brings up. And a lot of the images and a lot of the things I'm working through in the film is, well, how do we access it when we're not on a parabola flight? Where is it exists when we are in the world? Like, maybe this is a little too sci-fi woo woo, but our access, human experience happens beyond, or we are able to experience things that we didn't necessarily do. Like, we can imagine these things to be true, and sometimes those imaginations are the way you find those in real life experiences. Um, and I think that's true. Fanon talks about living beyond. To paraphrase, it's like living beyond historical precedents. So it's like, because in your lifetime you've never seen a more equitable society, doesn't mean you can't envision it and experience it enough to bring it into fruition. So that's sort of what the film is is interested in. And then next slide. And then we have the videos of some of the interviews, so you can sit and just listen to them outside of the film. And the next project that I wanted to talk about, if we have
Sorry,
time,
Kambui, when you say the interviews with whom?
with the people, the participants that I took up into the flight.
Mm. So before we move on to the next, I have
Mm.
no way of actually seeing if anybody's asking questions, by the way, audience.
Do you want to just table them all to the end?
Yes, so we might have to do that, but I'm going to ask a question here. It's like, how did you decide who was going to go up with you?
Part of it was thinking of, you know, who could not benefit, yeah, who could grow it. It's a seed. So you have an experience that is kind of life changing, and how can it go and bound? And so some of the things people talk about is, who they would want to share it with, and the fact that, there were opera singers and writers and painters and actors, and so there's a creativity that
Body with
will
culture,
probably,
like cultural sector.
yeah. But I think that was, I tried to get a reverend to come up with me, but his doctor said nope. He said that's not what 80 looks like. And, 80 and change. But but I think that those are some ways that it'll roll over into new works. And just, it's a hard, I'm trying not to make the talk so much about the experience, in part because it can just be about, you know, the way it's in my body and it gets kicked up all of a sudden, all of the time. The way it's a constant reminder of possible perspectives beyond the ones that I have only known my entire life. The last time you had a new sensation, like a totally new sensation, it's
Mhm.
like I can't, it's been decades. And then the possibilities that that brings up, and then also the I don't know, you get upset that, like, you're like, how come this is not my every day? How come this
Mhm.
was like a thing that I had to plan and drum up support and this and that and do all of these things, and I just want to take that, like, moment and just stretch it out, those 7 minutes, and just stretch it out. So there's a lot of things that I think I'm grappling with in there's an upcoming book, with Greg Miller Press. We're working on for next year, and even in that, that's going to parse out some of those ideas. But I think this is a um, from now on kind of set of questions for me to unpack, and it's been 3 years.
Mhm. All right. So if this was real life, there would be 9 minutes left because we would finish at 6, but I think we need to go about maybe 5 minutes over.
Okay.
Um, I know that people like know they have between 5 and 6. I don't want to like extend it too long so people at least get to the end, but 5 minutes over seems to be fair enough to try and get through the second project, which is Sharjah, right?
Yeah. So for the Sharjah Biennial, curator Al Qasimi invited me to do this crazy fun again installation, and it has a number of parts. So I'll say it is a piece of architecture. So um, the location was the Flying Saucer, which is a circular brutalist building in Sharjah, and the center has a dome. And so so I designed a 16-sided room I responded to the architecture within the UAE with high walls that's used for to provide shade all of the day, but you can't necessarily see around the corner. So this is two walls of the 16-sided circular room that I designed, and each wall is 20 feet. So when you first come in, next slide, when you first come in to the exhibition, you're like, okay, or the presentation, you're like, this is a series of large scale uh, watercolor and cyanotype paintings. So they're a mix of cyanotype with watercolor over top. And there are 8 diptychs that picture what I consider tricksters and shapeshifters, these people who interrupt colonial imagination. So this is Octavia Butler. The next slide is rapper Cool Keith. Um, and next slide, um, Coop, John Cooper, who is the first Black ventriloquist. And so the way it's designed, where the diptych has a portrait portion and a emblem, and as you walk around, you see each one of these tricksters. As you walk around a circular, kind of like gear shaped room, and you hear this music, um, but you don't
Music
necessarily know
in space.
in the space. You don't necessarily know where it's coming from. Um, and you engage with each one of these shapeshifters, tricksters, figures. You can go to the next slide. So this is Alan Craft. Alan Craft, Alan and William Craft, they were enslaved in the South. It's kind of interesting story. It's one of the most famous uh, slave escapes, and they're like, slavery sucks. We gotta get out of here, and we're not trying to die in here. And so they came up with this plot, and they said, William, you pretend to be my slave. And Alan was extremely light skinned and pretended to be a white man. And they traveled for 4 days to the north, literally in this game of, this like play across gender and class, um, having never been to most of the places that they would have to pretend were there every day, like first class cars and a train, and then one of the things they did was they said that Ellen had some kind of dental problem and wasn't able to speak, and so then William would pretend to speak on his behalf. And that's the way that shape shifting, that malleability, that became their way to literal or relative freedom. They would go to the north. There was a bounty on their head. They would escape back across the Atlantic to um, England because of the Fugitive Slave Act, and then continue to work as abolitionists and only return back to the U.S. after the end of slavery. Um, and then you go inside and you see
These
that
are the walls.
those are the walls.
The walls.
So about 4,000 square feet inside. And what we did was the walls all have this maze pattern. Um, a lot of the way well, one of the things that oppression does is it wastes your time in a macro and micro way, where it like wastes your life away. It consumes. And so I always thought about these mazes where if one door closes, do you now have to go all the way around the block, or is there another door? And so these myriad of paths are always there. And what the trickster does is operates more, instead of going the long way around, they go through wormholes. They know how to be where you're going to be. So there's a painting that envelops the entire room. That's a gold maze. Um, Next slide. And then they're multi-sided. I'm just going to speed through some of these, or not speed, but pick it up. Multi-sided and multi-sided figures, inspired by various Congolese masks. These figures are meant to talk about these figures in a way where both the way they see is from multiple perspectives and the way they are seen are from multiple perspectives. So we can go to the next slide.
Is there a direct correlation like this, or
No, it's not. It's not a correlation between this artwork and the sculpture and the painting. It's that when I think of the interior space as a whole, I kind of thought of it as a time jump, to be honest. Uh, this is an ancienter space. So we brought in 120 tons of sand. The sand was dyed blue. So you have this ocean of sand in the interior. It sounds different. It sounds like it sucks down sound, and it's warm. You have these porcelain sculptures that have like barnacle and encrusted, and they feel old. So it's kind of like this is the old world. This is also a place of reflection, but it's what makes the outside possible in a lot of ways.
what's this?
These like meteorite boulder sculptures that I made and placed in there so people could sit, climb on, chill out, hang out. Again, duration. You come there, you can stay there for an hour, sit on these, um, and they're about the size of like a Mini Cooper or like a small SUV. Some of the big ones.
Yeah, that's a big one there.
Yeah, that one's
And
probably 7 feet tall.
oh wow.
And so, you know, it was really great during the exhibition, having people just say, "Yeah, I come in here and I meditate every day." Like people I don't know, just like DMing me. Um, the fact that people I did know that were there or lived there um, talked about returning there. And I worked with Chris Padishaw, an amazing composer, to make a score. And the score, the way it happens, the way it's structured is it's like 10 minutes of music, 10 minutes of foghorns, because this call and response of the foghorn was really the sort of seed of it for me. And then 10 minutes of silence, and then a new cycle. And so if you come on Thursday, you might hear a totally different score than you did the last time you were there.
Mhm. So I'm going
Maybe
to
some,
stop
huh?
sharing. Or do you want to say something about this piece specifically?
What'd you say?
He said, I'm going to stop sharing so I can see if there are any questions that have gone in, but I didn't know if you wanted to speak about this piece.
No, I think that sort of gives enough of a context.
Oh, right. Nice images. So this is Penny. Is that one surface split, or were these creates separately in some way? Why the
Oh,
split?
okay. I know what you're talking about, the porcelain. Is it one image split? That's a good question. What I did was I sculpted in clay um, a base and used it as a press mold, and then augmented and combined the three press molds to make one figure. But it allowed me to have um, movement between it, so it's not like a slip cast where I want it to be exactly the same. Also, I'm using a technique called narcomi where you use different colored clay. So you can take white porcelain, and I was adding cobalt oxide in it to make it blue in different proportions to make different blues. Um, and then I can make a pattern so I could lay into the mold, say a stripe pattern, and then go horizontal in the first section of it, or however I felt. And then in the next one, I could augment it. So it gave some cohesion, but also a lot of room for play. And so that's the way I built it.
And so Mara asks, how long did this body of work take?
um, about a year, about a year. And like I'd say a good 8 months of that was sprinting.
Mhm.
Good 7, 8 months were like intense making.
So tricksters as boundary crossers. How did you choose these tricksters or boundary crossers?
Um, I with everything I try and start as wide as possible. So I had, let's say, 8 was the number that I really like. Just it's numerology, and then also just it's not too many, not too few. But people that you can touch, some people that you know, some people that you don't. Um, Playfulness with something. There was no like hard criteria, I'll say. But what I found was there's a playfulness even when the stakes are extremely high, where it's like I think of playfulness as nimbleness. Sometimes it's like playfulness it gets aligned with frivolousness, but it's at the highest levels of creation, whether it's science, whether it's sport, whether it's, um, whatever it is, you need to be playing in order to make breakthrough, to make innovation. So that was something that I looked for in all the figures. Um, and then also, there were people that ranked for me, like Sam Delaney was amongst them, Cool Keith, Ema Sumac. I love me some Ema Sumac. There were certain people, and then there were people that I peripherally knew about growing up, like the crafts, but didn't really know. I was like, oh yeah, I kind of remember this. And then as you do research, you're like, wow, this is even wilder than I thought. Um, yeah.
So is that an exhibition that will be coming anywhere in the United States, or is it so much because the sand, for example, and the shape? It's very kind of site specific or context specific.
Yeah, it was. I think it was definitely site specific. I think the context is global. I think building. I wouldn't build that same installation, but I think I would build something that is like a cousin of that. Um, it would be great to show that work in the States. Um, right now, and it's not planned. And the sand is kind of one of the easier parts. I think figuring out what blue, how to make the blue, how long it took to dye the sand, um, that that was a challenge. But bringing in the sand, we could do somewhere. We could do somewhere. So yeah, let me know.
So Dara Harrison says North Star in the 700 square foot room. Why did you decide to paint the wall as opposed to line it with paper? Did I hear that correctly? Let me know when I can get that designed for my living room. It's dope.
Daryl. Um, uh, the I wish it was 700 square feet. I really, it's about 4,000 square feet. It's 70 feet long by, I think 50 feet wide. I don't know. Art math. Um, the the reason I wanted to paint it versus to print it, it's one, I didn't know what it is. Like there's a large talk about play. There's a large level of improv, and I tip my hat to all the curators. Lauren Dickinson, and Juan Omar at San Jose. It's just like I showed up and thought about it, and then decided what I was going to do. And like Hor and Sharjah said, I'm going to paint something. I'm going to paint a thing. It's like okay. And then one day I came in and I had like a little bowl with gold paint. I was like, it's gonna be great. Just need 8 more days, 20 hours a day. I'm gonna knock it out, no problem. Um, and so, but I like doing it like that because whether I love it or hate it, it is just what I believe in this moment, and that's important to me. Um, and so, yeah, and I can't imagine how pains take. It would be less exciting.
Mhm.
And it's a dance. It's a dance. I didn't show any pictures here with me in a 20-foot extension pole roller, painting the space, but it's like you get to dance with the painting that's, you know, 25 steps long or, yeah, like 25 steps long.
Amazing. So I think that it is 6:08. Kambui, thank you. Sorry
Thank
about
you.
all of the Daryl's just made one. I'll give the comment so that everybody can hear it, but maybe I'll do that and then say thank you to you at the end. Maybe you agree that we all evolve creatively, but the core of how we perceive things deepens, still sharing a common seed of all things we create. If you agree, what was your journey going from your earlier works of photography, experimental film to North Star? Seems like you focused on live subjects in real space, then explored creating voices and narratives while watching movies with the sound turned down, and now this is abstract. So no need to answer that. I just wanted to make sure that it was read out. Penny says thank you. I say thank you. And
Thanks, Penny.
for the students, the curatorial crew, see you in the other Zoom in a minute. And Kambui, you've got that other Zoom link.
Yes, I'm gonna click on that. Thank you for everybody for coming out and making that time. Um, I look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.